Hello everybody, thank you for having me. My name's Toby. I work in Northern Adelaide. I'm mostly an administrator these days, but I trained as a general physician, acute physician. And Stephen said, oh, come to a journal club. And I said, what will I present? And what I'm going to present to you is a paper that we had published earlier this year, which came out of a conversation between me and my registrar. And so really I just want to show you sort of, with a mind that is open to good clinical questions, how you might be able to answer a question using some pretty simple analytical techniques. Take you through it. There it is. I'm a general physician, a medical administrator. I really love quality improvement. That's really why I'm an administrator. I don't really like credentialing, but I really enjoy making things better. And I'm a terrible academic, and I didn't realize there would be professors in the room. But you're all very welcome, and you can critique my research real time. I'm also a father and a husband, and not all of these Venn diagram circles overlap very well at any given time. Kind of, very busy, I'm sure you all understand. Do you know who this is? That's Charlie Munger. Does anybody know anything about Charlie Munger? He was the vice chair of Berkshire Hathaway along with Warren Buffett. And I was presenting this to my wife last night, and I was like, oh yeah, he's 99, he's going to turn 100 on the 1st of January. And he's got this book called Poor Charlie's Almanac, which is a big tome of a thing. But he said lots of wise things. He had a long time to do it, 99 years and 11 months. And this is one I like, as opportunity comes to the prepared mind. That is to say, if you have a prepared mind, you can take advantage of opportunity. And so have a prepared mind. And so this is Tim. Tim's a fella from Kilkenny in Ireland. This big sort of farmer of a fella. You can imagine chucking hay bales. But a geriatrician as well. And one of the most beautiful bedside manners I've ever seen in a doctor. Your heart would melt. He'd kneel down next to these old people and he'd hold their hand and he'd talk beautifully he would melt your heart. He was a good fella. And one time we were there, somebody had fallen and broken a hip. And he said, oh, you just don't want to break a bone in hospital. He said, you just don't want to break a bone in hospital. I said, you know what happens? Oh, I know. Oh, they just die. They just die. Like you could start the antibiotics as soon as, because you give them the opioids, then they have the aspiration. You go, oh God, how bad is it to break a bone in hospital? I said, I don't know. How bad is it? He goes, I don't know. What do you tell relatives? I say, we say they've broken the bone and that'll fix, but they might die. How likely are they to die? I don't know. Should we find out? So we found out. So how do we measure falls? This is not a rhetorical question. How would you measure falls? You want to measure falls in hospital. How are you going to measure falls?
SLSs.
How do we count? SLSs. How many SLSs going for falls? What kind of capture do we have? Hard to say, really. How would you tell? Unless you stood on a ward counting falls. But those trials have been done. Our SLS data is actually pretty good. So we capture like thousands of falls a quarter. In my division. It's pretty good. How else might we capture falls? ICD-10 codes with condition onset flags. That's right. So who had a fall in hospital? You look at the coding. How good is the coding? It's pretty terrible. And how do we account for confounders? So if you're older, you're going to break more bones, and if you're younger, so how do we account for that? And ultimately, let's answer the question: how much worse is it to fall and break a bone than to fall and not break a bone? And that was our question. So we went with coding. 236,000 inpatient admissions, 721 falls recorded. My general medicine wards will clock up 721 falls before we finish talking. So that's how good the coding is at capturing falls. Of those, 128 were associated with a fracture. Well, what proportion of falls are associated with a fracture? It's probably not that proportion. We're probably capturing big falls in the coding data, to the point where somebody wrote there was a fall and they got the intern up to check. And so this was our data. So everything I say from here, just remember, we are talking about falls that got documented and coded as falls. This is not capturing all falls, but of the falls that were going to be recorded and coded, what's the difference between those who were coded, didn't sustain a fracture, versus those who were coded and did sustain a fracture? And lo and behold, the fall with fracture group are older. They're older. Of course they're more likely to die. Oh, sorry, I don't want to give you the ending. They're more likely to die if they get a fracture. They're older. There was a difference in gender. Those that fell and sustained a fracture were more likely to be female, and they were more likely to have dementia, more likely to have delirium. And we included a few other comorbidities that are common and might increase your fracture risk. So those are the baseline statistics. This one's interesting. Why is that interesting? Andrew, why is that interesting? With the fall with the fracture group, 5 of them, 4%, had osteoporosis. Not as much as you would have thought. Well, it's because you're not as pessimistic as I am about coding data. It's about what I would have thought would have got captured in the coding. But these were almost all going to be falls from standing height. If you break a bone and fall from standing height, you satisfy the PBS criteria for an anti-resorbative drug. You almost certainly have osteoporosis. But just remember, coding data, 4% osteoporosis in the fall with fracture group. OK. Read that. Now, when I was an RMO and a registrar, I didn't really know what that meant. I would read journal articles and I would skip over that stuff. I always go, yeah, somebody else's business, right? And I'm just going to give you, like, the crappy academics version of what that means and why it's important. Is there anything significant on that EEG?
I was going to say, is that sleep phenomenon?
I have no idea. I have no idea. It was not a test. All right, this is a population pyramid. Do you know what a population pyramid is? Okay, you got age groups, and you got the proportion of a population with that age group. On the left is Nigeria, on the right is Sweden. Which country has the higher mortality, Nigeria or Sweden? Don't look at that, it's not going to tell you. Nigeria has the highest. What if I told you it's Sweden?
I'd be wrong and you'd be right.
Yeah, why is it Sweden? Why is it? If you beamed into the body of a randomly selected Nigerian or a randomly selected Swede, does anybody remember Quantum Leap? No, it doesn't matter. Why are you more likely to die early as the Swede? Because they're older. If you randomly beam into the Swedes, you're much more likely to be 70 to 90 than you are in Nigeria. Almost certainly not going to be an older Nigerian. So how are we going to account for this? And the answer is pretty simple. You look at the likelihood of dying in one of those stripes, one of those age groups, and you look at the likelihood of dying on the equivalent age group, and you divide one likelihood by the other likelihood, and you get a ratio. And it turns out that the average 20-year-old Nigerian is much more likely to die than the average 20-year-old Swede, which is really what Jerry was saying. And so what you've done there is you've accounted for age in your analysis. Great. We get an odds ratio. This is India. There's something unusual about India. Well, there's two things that are unusual about India. One of them is the shape that sort of bulges around that 20 to 30 category. Now, Australia also does that because Australia is a big immigrant nation. India is not a big immigrant nation, but their fertility rate has been dropping through the floor. But there's something else on that graph. Have you seen it yet? It's asymmetrical. All right? There's way more men, well, proportionally, there's more men in India than there are women. All right? And I can tell you, as somebody who worked on a labour ward in Calcutta, there's a level of dissatisfaction when you bring the baby out and it's a girl, and it's going to cost them a lot of money down the road versus if it's a man. And so for whatever reason, there are more boys born in India than women. So, okay, well, how are you going to do this? Well, you'd also have to account for the sex difference, and you do it the same way. All right, now you're doing logistic regression because you've accounted for age, and now you're accounting for gender differences, and then you get this adjusted odds ratio, which says, which will give you your answer. All right, AOR, adjusted odds ratio. This is risk of mortality. And when you see a list like this, you can assume that the odds ratio for, let's say, fracture as an inpatient 2.37. Your odds of dying as an inpatient if you sustain a fracture versus not sustain a fracture has been corrected for everything else in the list. All right? So it's been corrected for age because we know if you're older, you're probably more likely going to die. And this was our answer, essentially. The other one that sticks out like a sore thumb, well, actually, if you just look above age under 65, just hit the sort of border of statistical significance. And if you're younger, your odds of dying, and we dichotomized into older and younger based on 65. No offense to anybody over 65 in the room. Your odds ratio for dying, your adjusted odds ratio was 0.49, so reasonably protective to be younger. You'll be happy to hear. And malignancy, if you had a malignancy, then your inpatient mortality odds ratio was 5.12. But that tells me that fracture as an inpatient is bested only by having cancer for killing people in hospital, and we took that as our answer. We also looked at length of stay, and we also used linear regression for this, and we found that the things that contributed most to length of stay was fall with a fracture, an extra 9.2 days. If you fell and sustained a fracture, compared with those who fell and did not sustain a fracture. Delirium made you stay for 10.6 days longer, and oh God, we've got a lot of that on the wards, and that'll be no surprise to anybody else. And a diagnosis of malignancy didn't add quite so much of length of stay, but then again, they died, and so that might explain that. So the question that Tim asked me, and I asked him, how much worse is it if you have a fall that ends up coded as a fall and you break a bone? You get increased inpatient mortality, adjusted odds ratio of 2.34, and an increased length of stay of 9.2 days. And that was our answer. Thank you. Questions at the end?
One thing.
Yes.
So, although I said no questions, part of the brief is we've got medical students here of a variety of backgrounds.
Yes.
And part of the role of this journal club is to help them understand, postgraduate education pathways and different pathways they can take. Could you just talk for maybe 5-10 minutes about how you've got to be where you are and things that you might impart on junior medical students who are interested in pursuing a career in medicine, research, quality improvement?
Yes, certainly. And as I said, I'm not the archetypal researcher, but thank you. So I was born at a young age. I did my medical training in Dublin for 6 years, University College Dublin and the Mater Hospital. I worked in Ireland, did like BPT there equivalent, and I worked as a renal registrar, so junior reg, for about a year, and then I'm going to Australia. Moved to Australia, got into BPT pretty quickly, decided to leave the renal life behind, became a general physician, which was an excellent move on my part. I really liked acute medicine. So I did my advanced training included cardiology and ICU and ED. Not many advanced trainees in Gen Med do ED, but I think it's a fantastic rotation. And I started a master's at that stage in health services management. Why did I do that? While I was working in the Royal Adelaide in general medicine and studying for exams, we had a conference, and it was based around the idea that AMUs hit Australia in about 2010-ish. Jerry, I'm looking at you, 2010-ish. Imported from the UK when the mid-2000s, they were sort of in their heyday and coming on. And then in about, I'd say 2014, 15, we had a conference, and you would have loved to have gone to this one. It was in the National Wine Centre, and it was called Acute Medical Units Towards Consistency. Fabulous. I'm sure you'd be very excited by consistency in acute medical units. Well, I certainly was, and I met all these cool people from all around Australia, and a lot of them were like, general physicians who you could sort of name or you read their research. They kept talking about this thing called quality, and that was the thing I hadn't quite got my head around, this thing called quality. What's quality? Like, quality is when you look at how we do a thing, and you realize we didn't necessarily design it that way, it's just sort of come to be that way. And surely to God, we could intervene and make it better. And that's basically quality improvement. And I had been sort of heading towards this for my whole career, but I hadn't been able to put a name on it. And I remember being told by a prominent academic, he said, look, you're either going to go towards academia or you're going to go towards management. And, it's rare that anybody's good at both of them these days. And so maybe pick which one you want to go towards. And so I thought management. So I started a Master's of Health Services Management in Monash. And it was one of the best things I've done. That kind of formal education isn't necessarily for everybody, but for me, it was eye-opening and it was fantastic. Started work as a consultant in 2017 in the new RA. We literally, actually 1 month before we moved, and then worked in the AMU there for a bit. Really enjoyed it. Led a project where we put general physicians in the ED for a year, and that worked, I thought, pretty well. But then they cut the funding, and I was kind of annoyed. And then somebody called past my office and said, "Toby, do you want to come down and work in the Queen Elizabeth?" And I said, "Well, I've had it up to the back teeth with this place, so yes." And I went down to the Queen Elizabeth, and then very quickly became the head of unit there, and changed some stuff there. It was quite gratifying because it was quite broken, and there was some serious low-hanging fruit, which was, it was good. Made it better. I like making things better. I don't really have the attention span for research. Quality improvement is better for those of us just got slightly shorter attention span, and you can see things getting better in front of you. And then for the last 6 months, I've been in Northern Adelaide as the divisional director for medicine. It's been a whirlwind. It's been fantastic. A really good move. And just very shortly, or hopefully next year, I'm finishing off my training is in the College of Medical Administrators. So I don't know if you know this, I certainly didn't, but you can be a specialist medical administrator. That can be your specialty. That's all you specialize in. It's a registered specialty with APRA. And so Sam and I decided to embark on this on the fellowship of the Royal Australasian College of Medical Administrators, FRACMA, and we hope to both be FRACMAs pretty soon.
And then the last part of the brief
That's me.
is advice for medical students that might be interested in that sort of pathway.
Don't give anyone advice. There's if you've got an interest, you will be hot property. Like some doctors, and it's absolutely fine. Just want to do clinical work. That's fine. If, like me, you look at a problem and you recognize that we could do things better. And not only do you recognize it, but you have the ability to articulate how things could be better and bring people with you, then you will find no end of things to do, and you will be hot property. And you should pick and choose the things that you are interested in. Don't necessarily take everything that comes along. Somebody once told me, if it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no, and get involved in those sorts of things.
Brilliant. So I've hogged the questions, but I think we're trying a shorter format for the moment so we can chat and ask questions in person afterwards. So if you join me in thanking Toby.
Thank you.